Welcome back, everybody. So this is a bit of a different video. It's the one that I said I wouldn't probably make about my current, health, mental health, whatever you want to call it, situation. And yeah, it's gonna be a bit more serious. And obviously, if you don't want to deal with any of this, think of this as your content warning, and if you're just not interested, then that's totally fine. Skip this one. I do have ideas for new book videos for the next couple of days as well, and as soon as I manage to actually buy more beer, they will also happen. Anyway, that's sort of where we are right now. We're going to talk about why I'm not in a good state right now. But at least I have one final beer. So, cheers. All right. So, I've done videos like this before, and I'm always struggling whether I should do them or not, because it feels like whining, and I'll try to make a bit of a larger point here, that I'll come back to at the end. But, yeah, overall, I just want to talk about, why I feel like crap right now, and why I think it's sort of a combination of, at least 3 factors that kind of come all together in a very bad way. There's obviously also external factors that also play a role, but there's 3 that are intrinsic to my very specific personal situation, and I want to focus on those because, yeah, we all suffered through stuff like the plague over the last 2 years and shit like that. Those just are external factors that exacerbate the stuff that I'm already going through. So I want to focus on those 3 things, which are obviously my physical disability, that being my blindness, my neurodiversity, that being me being diagnosed with ADHD, and that third part, my mental health, which is sort of in a very depressive downswing right now. I do feel there's a combination of those out of those 3, and the way they interact make it very difficult for me to actually get out of these situations. But I figured, self-analysis is easier available than actually getting therapy right now. And so we're going to do that, and you can totally skip this if you don't want to. All right, so let's look at the first part here. The first part being, obviously, the blindness. Now, I've spoken about that before, what it feels like to be blind, all of these things, and I can repeat some of that. The main issue there, however, is that what blindness does to any kind of disability does, it takes away a lot of agency. That meaning there's a lot of stuff that I just can't do because I'm blind. Flying airplanes, that kind of stuff. Obviously also much smaller stuff like, walking into a shop and just looking around, browsing and taking whatever I feel like. That's the more everyday issues that just come with being blind that are annoying. What it also means is that there's a whole range of things that I can't do when it comes to maybe having jobs and stuff. And, well, yeah, you can use your own mind there. It's just part of it. But there's another side to that. And that side is that because we, at least my experience, a lot of other people with similar disabilities or even other disabilities, what is very important for us, and especially and definitely for me, is to still be self-sufficient, to still be in charge of our lives, and to do as much as is possible, and constantly test out those hard borders and issues that come up with a disability, right? It's you don't, at least I constantly try to do stuff that maybe is very hard or whatever, just to prove to myself and the universe out there that I can. It's, it's built in from the start. And that, I think, is a good thing in general. It has its downsides, running into shit, sometimes actually hurting myself physically because I do stuff that I probably shouldn't have done. It does have all these downsides, and I'm aware of those, but overall, I do believe that that drive to constantly prove to myself that I am able to do a lot of things is, in general, a good thing. We will see that it also has a dark side, because I do believe all these three things kind of come together in a rather harmful combination. Now let's look at ADHD. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff with that, and everyone has their own experience, and but in my case, a lot of it is that, I have difficulties to focus. I was, diagnosed. I got some meds, but for whatever reason, those didn't really work. So I'm currently not on meds. I'm just like trying to get through life without it, which, brings with it some other challenges and stuff. But the main issue for me is obviously that focusing on things for a long time is kind of hard. It gets even harder if it's something that I'm not already like super, super, super interested in. You've seen results of that, which means, me making videos about stuff that I'm interested in spontaneously, and those are usually the best videos I make, when I'm just like, bam, now. And then you see that long-ass video that I planned to make and been working on for like 3 or 4 weeks. At this point, my interest has waned so much. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. Will I ever finish that? I really need to kick myself to get back to that. There's obviously ways to work around that, but they're kind of hard. On the other hand, I can get super excited about topics, and I do believe that in those situations, when I'm super excited about something, I obviously have the capability to get like a lot of expert knowledge about it in like short time, and really dig into a topic, and also transmit my excitement and knowledge and stuff. When I talk about stuff that I'm excited about, I do believe that I am actually relatively good at doing that. I can be infectious, so to speak. And, so there's like a dark side to it, and there's a good side to it, and you see what I mean, right? So that's the second part. And the third part is obviously depression. Now, there's very little positive about depression, and I will not go too deeply into it, because I'm very much self-diagnosed on this right now. I'm like self-diagnosed by a lot of other people. I am, however, currently looking into getting like an official diagnosis, so I can actually maybe also get some meds. We'll get into that at the end of the story. So now let's look at how those things unfortunately come together and fuel each other, because I do believe that's the main point that has driven me into like the situation that I'm in currently. All right, now let's look at the first part. I already said that dealing with blindness is a constant struggle against the restrictions that the universe has put upon me. It's a constant struggle. Now, obviously, there's other situations that do the same. That's just the one that I'm dealing with the most. And obviously, every time I can't do something, or I fail at doing something because of my physical disability, because of my blindness, that makes me feel like shit. And if that happens a lot, it certainly does not help any like depressive thoughts or my depression in any way, right? That's obvious, right? Now, let's look at how, on the other hand, the blindness and the ADHD interact. And that's something that I feel is really something that I didn't think about too much for a long time, but it's something that I recently thought about, and it's like, yeah, it's a huge reason. Now, here's the thing. Because of my disability, because of the blindness, I do take longer for certain tasks. One simple example is like if you look at a website because you're looking for information, if you're looking at a book because you're looking for information, for one specific piece of information, for example, you can skim read. You can just like scroll through something until you find the one thing that you need. Bam, there you are. Using a screen reader, you can't do that, or not very efficiently. You can jump back and forth and so forth, but you can't actually scroll in a meaningful way. So most of the time, you just read something line by line by line, and that can be very slow if you're looking for one very specific piece of information, especially on, say, a very, very cluttered website that is not exactly built for blind people to find anything. Now imagine you start out with a topic that you need to do. It's already something that you're not really interested in, but you have to do it. You start out with it. And instead of it taking like 5 minutes, it takes 20 minutes. And just imagine how that affects someone who's already struggling with ADHD and problems to focus. It makes it so much harder to actually finish any of those tasks, because I'm like, I need to do this. And I scroll. I can't find it because the website is super, cluttered and fucked up. And I scroll. And after 10 minutes, I'm like, nah, fuck this shit. I'll do something else. Now, is that wise? Hell no. Is it possible for me to avoid that and just keep going? On a good day, yes. On a bad day, not so much. So, what happens here is that even the things that usually give me joy, which is like digging into stuff and so forth, get sometimes, those moments of joy get broken up much earlier because of that. And it obviously also means that, one of the things that in theory I should be able to do when it comes to, doing jobs and stuff like that, which is work on a computer, gets so much harder because I just can't get to focus on a task that would take 5 minutes for anyone, and I just can't focus on that specific task for like 20 minutes. And now imagine how that actually, that thing feeds into like a depression when you're like, I should be able to do this because I know rationally I'm good at this. And then I can't focus because it just takes too long. So I fail even at the things where I'm like, which I objectively should be able to do despite the blindness. I now fail because the blindness and the ADHD combined make it so much harder to actually do them. And that, then feeds into the depression. And that's obviously not good. Now we come to another aspect, which I think is also vitally important. So I struggle with depression. Fine. And those of you who have struggled with depression, or those of you who have heard or thought about it, realize that means that sometimes you can't do things, right? Because your mental health just doesn't allow you to do that. Now, my issue here is that, look back at what I said about the blindness and struggling with blindness. What happens there is I am constantly pushing against these boundaries, going over those boundaries, just to prove that I can. Because it is vitally important for me. It is vitally important for me to actually, do things on my own. Don't need help for this. Can do this on my own. And now I have a second condition there that also prevents me from doing things, but for a completely different reason. One that is in my head and not just my eyes, so to speak, right? And to get that bit into my brain that is already, struggling with depression and the feeling that I can't get anything done, makes it so much harder to actually go anywhere, do anything, and ask for help. Because at the end of the day, depression is not something that you can just overcome by yourself. It doesn't, or at least it doesn't work with my approach that I have built up over the years, over the decades at this point, that I had take to, dealing with restrictions due to my blindness, which is just push harder against it. That doesn't work with depression. So what we have here, I feel, over, and that has built up for, especially over the last two and a half years because of, the whole plague and whatnot, is that my depression has gotten worse. Also, a lot of things that I could do before to just, change up things and stuff like that fell away. So I was way more focused on doing things digitally. Things that felt, took longer and longer, or not longer and longer, but took longer than my focus would allow. And then I failed at them. That makes me more depressed. And at the same time, my impulse in those situations is to just push harder against that boundary, and where reality in a lot of cases is a very hard boundary when you're blind, sometimes as hard as a lamppost. That depression boundary is more like it's softer. It's like you push and it gives, but you can never actually get through. It's more like a rubber barrier that you can just push against, and nothing happens. But at the same time, I still feel I have to actually get my shit together and do this on my own. Have to actually, because, of all that other stuff that I've built up over the years, or not to say decades, on my through the blindness, makes it so much harder to actually accept the fact that there's a boundary that I can't actually overcome on my own, that I can't actually get sorted out in any way, and that it is another boundary, that is a different boundary, that is so difficult to realize. I mean, even now I'm talking about it, and like in my mind, like rationally, I can rationalize all of that. It works wonderfully. But do you think I can actually get up and actually call doctors to get an appointment, to maybe actually get a prescription for meds to actually get out of this? Do you know how long that takes? And how easy it is to just like, push it aside because I get like distracted by something. That is just insanely difficult. And what usually happens in those situations when I get overwhelmed by all of these things is I just shut down completely. And this is sort of where we come into like the last stage of this interesting, or hopefully interesting conversation, which is I do flee. I practice my very, very own and very specific escapism, which is I read books. I read a ton of books. And what I also do at this moment, which is sort of like a form of self-therapy, is I make videos about it. And, making those quick videos about it, like quick videos about like stuff like Wheel of Time or last year, my last book of the fall, they kind of work, right? I have an idea, I sit down, I talk about it, I upload it, and I get immediate feedback. Some of you comment, which is wonderful. People watch it, people like it. Bam! So what will I do next? Will I actually sit down and focus on the thing that I really, really, really need to sort out, which I just can't focus on anyway, and that will, drag me deeper into depression? Or will I focus on something else? Well, I obviously focus on the other thing because that's just how I am. And then I'll just like push everything away. I don't answer emails, I don't answer my phone, I don't answer messages at all. I just focus on the one thing where I still have the feeling that I'm actually doing something. And actually doing something successfully. Sort of successfully. I mean, the level of success is obviously debatable, but it's something where I still feel that I have something of an agency and I get immediate feedback. And that's basically where I am right now. I have to answer a couple hundred emails. I have to call a lot of people. I have to sort out a shit ton of problems. But instead I'm sitting here and making this video, which is, a thing of its own. But, as I said, I am at least planning to, and hopefully I will actually get, some form of medication and obviously, hopefully also some form of therapy in the long run. Obviously, it takes a while to get those things sorted out, but it's something I definitely need to do. And hopefully I can, have someone help me just like dig through the practical elements of stuff like the record label and shit like that to get these things in a situation where I am just less weighed down by everything. Because of course, me digging myself into this hole has led to a ton of financial strain, which then makes it even harder to actually do anything. And, everything's connected with everything, but you already knew that. So why do I think it's still worth talking about this and not just, leave it? And why do I think this is not just me whining? I mean, it's also me whining, but I think there's a larger point that I wanted to make, and that is that health and mental health is always unique. It's always a combination of a ton of circumstances, and almost all of those are very much out of our own control, which is, yeah, that's kind of the problem, right? They're out of our control, and it's very difficult for us to accept that something is out of our own control. And it's, as I said, it's always unique, which means we have to look at what is our specific case, and that makes following simple rules of just do this or just do that so much harder to actually, follow, and sometimes they do even more harm. I just wanted to share my individual situation, so, you know, to show that, yeah, they're very individual. There are obviously things in common with other people, and it helps to share them, I hope. But it's also very much a unique thing, and it helps to be aware of that. And yeah, I don't know. I hope you took something out of this. And if you watched this all the way to the end, then very much, well, thank you very much for that. And I'll see you in a hopefully more positive video very soon. Possibly tomorrow. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching, and, well, cheers.